Yeah. Okay.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm also over at a friend's house, so not my usual setup, but I did bring my headphones and my microphone, so I'm all good.
Nicola, I just want to say thank you so much for taking your time out to speak to me today because it's honestly an honor to have you and to be able
Oh,
to
thank
speak to
you.
you. Your book helped me so much through my own recovery, and I just want to say thank you so much for taking your time today.
Yeah,
Is it
absolutely.
the morning with you, or is it what
It's
time?
afternoon. It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
1 o'clock in the afternoon.
So
Perfect.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I guess we'll
Yep.
start off for people that don't know you. If you just maybe want to introduce yourself and just tell us a bit about you and obviously your book, No Period Now What, for those that
Sure.
don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So my name is Dr. Nicola Sykes, formerly Rinaldi. I'm getting divorced, so changed my name. Um, so I trained at MIT as a computational biologist. So I was working in yeast with transcriptional regulation, so like involving DNA and proteins and how that, how they all work together. Um, and I did that because I knew I wanted to have kids at some point, and I wanted to have a career where I would be able to work from home or whatever. And as a lab scientist, which was my initial calling, you really can't do that. Like you have to be at the bench and whatever. So I was like, this is going to be great. Um, so I was doing that, and I really enjoyed my lab work. I enjoyed the folks that I was working with, and we would hang out together a lot because my husband at the time was a consultant, so he was away like 4 to 5 days a week. So I was hanging out with people in my lab. So I exercised a ton. I
Yeah.
just found a bunch of things that I really enjoyed. Like I would say I was a band geek in high school. Like I played the flute and I was in orchestra and chorus and all that stuff, and not very sporty. But then I discovered sports as I got older. And so I started playing ice hockey, and I played volleyball and squash and biked to and from Cambridge, which is like 20 miles one way. I would only do one way at a time. I would do a
Yeah.
combination of biking and driving. Um, but I just really enjoyed all of it. And I was also going to the gym and lifting weights with my lab mates. And some of them decided they were going to go on a diet. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do that too. Like sort of, I'd always disliked my love handles, wanted a six pack,
Yeah. Yeah.
admired people who had the vein running down their biceps. I was like, I can totally do that. And at the time, I thought it also aligned with my goals of pregnancy because I had started to read about like, getting pregnant and things you should do to help your cause. And, lots of places said lose weight to have an easier time getting pregnant. So I was like,
Yeah.
it all lines up, it all works out. So let's do this. So, as many of us who end up with HA are, I am a type A personality. And when I set my mind to something, then I'm, gosh darn it, going to do it no matter
Yeah,
what.
I'm the
So
exact
we
same.
picked an amount of calories. Yeah. So we picked a number of calories per day. And I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to eat each day. And, I didn't really know anything about nutrition. So it's like, that's the fuel I'm allowed, and that's what I'm going to have. And I lost a bunch of weight really quickly. And I was like, this is great. It's fantastic. Like, look, I can see I've got that vein.
Yeah.
It was, and then I went off the birth control pill, which I had been on for a few years to actually start trying to get pregnant. And I didn't have a period. So,
Yeah.
I went to see my doctor, and she sort of said, well, just, it often takes a while after you come off the pill. So just come back and see me in 3 months. And I asked about my diet and exercise, and she's like, nah, no, probably fine, not a big deal. Maybe you could eat a little bit more and maybe you could exercise a little bit less. So I sort of kind of did that. I stopped tracking my calories quite as intensely,
Yeah.
um, but really no guidance. So it ended up being 6 months, and then I was finally diagnosed with hypothalamic amenorrhea, which we abbreviate as HA because it's a lot easier to say.
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
Yeah, yes, and I ended up going to a reproductive endocrinologist and sort of just jumping into the fertility treatment path. So I did have, I think it was about 8 months in, I went for a vacation in South Africa, which is where I'm originally from. So it was a 3-week trip, and I was spending time with family and friends. And I actually did have a period then. And, I really chalked that up to, I had been slowly increasing my food and cutting my exercise. And then this was 3 weeks where I was just resting. I wasn't playing ice hockey. I wasn't playing volleyball. I wasn't lifting weights. The only thing we did was walk and play a bit of golf, which is not a super intense sport.
Yeah.
So I did have a period then. But then I came back and I had doctor's appointments and they're like, oh, nothing's happening. You should just go to fertility treatment. So I did that because I didn't know any better. And nobody my doctor sort of said, oh, well, you always had irregular periods as a kid. So they're probably going to be irregular again. So you should just do the injectables. Ended up being that part of the story. Eventually, I had 4 failed injectable cycles. We were going to do IVF, but had to wait for insurance reasons. And so in the time frame between when I had my 4th failed injectable cycle and when we were going to start IVF, my doctor told me, you should be on birth control pills again. I was like, why on earth would I want to do that? I want to be pregnant. So why would I want to take the pill? And it turns out I did ovulate and I got pregnant all on my very own. So that was sort of that part of the journey for me. Then I had some pregnancy complications and they put me on what they called modified bed rest. So I was able to go to work and come home, but that was it. So I had so much free time and I happened to find a message board online that was about hypothalamic amenorrhea. So I joined and started answering questions and sharing my experience and learning a bunch more. And eventually after a few years, people on the board said, so much, you write a book. And around and there was just so little information available. There were no other books on the topic. And so I was like, you know what? I think I should write a book.
Yeah.
And so that turned into my book, No Period, Now What? I had a lot to say because I learned so much from the board. And, anytime somebody would have a question, I would go and look in the medical literature and read the relevant papers, scientific papers. And, and having that scientific training means that I'm able to sort of understand and size those, those medical nuggets. Yeah. And so I put it in a book to, make it a little bit more accessible to the general public. And, the idea of all in came from the board. That's what people started calling it on the board was, when you really took that plunge and nourished your body properly and cut out the high intensity exercise. And, so we ended up using that term in the book and it's become quite popular since then. So.
The book's amazing. I remember when I was a long distance competitive runner and I had an eating disorder following an incident that happened to me at work. And I remember being in a forum to do with macros and stuff, and there was this woman and she kept mentioning your book to me and she said, you should read it. And I was like, oh, I just wasn't ready to kind of research it. And then I remember when I was obviously diagnosed with an eating disorder and having no period, and it was hypothalamic amenorrhea. And I was like, what is that? I couldn't even pronounce it. And I remember buying your book, and I remember because when I lived back home after everything had happened, because I lived away, and I remember reading your book, and I remember just with it being so engrossed with it, and because all the different sections and what it tells you about how actually not having a period can be detrimental to your health in so many ways. And for so many years, 5 years, I didn't care. And I remember I used to actually get hot sweats, reading everything that can follow, how it can affect not only your organs, your bones, the length of time, obviously, that you can live. It's just, you don't think about that when you're on a pursuit of wanting to change your body shape and that feeling of control. Yeah. You kind of don't really think about what it's actually doing to your body, do you?
Yeah. And also I think that a lot of people either don't know or don't talk about it. So there's a big push to, be stronger, faster, whatever. Oh, and cut your food at the same time because be thinner. And so it's that's totally the opposite of what you want to do. If you want to be stronger and faster and exercise more, then eat more. That's give your body the fuel that it needs. It's just there's just a lack of understanding and understanding, and also the idea that thinner equals better no matter what, So I think put those two things together and it's just a recipe for not good things.
No, and I think as well, more so, I mean, even in my sort of, it's like the diet culture that people think, being thinner is better and, lose a bit of weight. And like, I'm not anti-diet. Like, I think if people want to diet and, lose a few pounds, then, that's great if it makes you feel better. But I think it's when it comes to a point where it can start affecting your life, and to know, I had loads of people say, oh, well, I'm dieting and I still have my period. And I'm like, but you're also on the pill. And, I'm sure you'll be able, because you'll know more about that, how if you can be dieting and on the pill, but that can actually mask you not having a period. So
100%, yes.
And I think there's just not enough information about it. Like you say, it's not spoken about enough. And I think obviously from going through what I have, that's why I've created sort of my second page, and I want to share it more. It's like, even because I live in Scotland and I live up in the Highlands, and it's not really well known. People will know Alana, like she's had an eating disorder, and I mean, they're so complex. There's so many different ones, but so even the condition HA, hypothalamic amenorrhea, can you explain to people what that actually is? Because I'm sure a lot of people don't know what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So the name of the condition actually tells you quite a lot about it. So amenorrhea is missing a period, a menstrual cycle for 3 months or more, is the technical definition. And as you were just saying, if you are on birth control pills, you can't tell if you would have a natural period or not, because the hormones, they provide your body estrogen, or fake estrogen really, that thickens your uterine lining, and then also a form of progesterone called a progestin that gets your body to shed that lining. So you are having a monthly bleed that's not a period really, and it's not the driving force in a normal menstrual cycle is the ovulation, releasing an egg that then can allow for pregnancy. And the hormones associated with ovulation are what are quite important for our bodies. So your estradiol goes from, in the units you would be familiar with, probably something around 100 to 800 to 1,000 around the time of ovulation. And your progesterone will go from maybe something like less than 3 to 30 to 40. So, both of those hormones are going up by at least tenfold around the time of ovulation. And that's a big jump. And we know from research that's been done in people who are postmenopausal that both of those hormones have fairly significant effects in terms of our bone density, our heart health, our brain health. So the pill provides some replacement, but more and more research is showing that it's not quite as good as natural hormones. So I think being aware that a bleed on the pill does not mean that you would be naturally getting a period, and also understanding that hormones are, it's not awful, but it's not the same as having a natural cycle. So, for somebody who's not using birth control pill for contraceptive purposes, maybe thinking about going off and, trying another method, or just seeing what your body does on its own, so to have an idea isn't a bad idea. Little tangent there, sorry.
No, not at all. It's so interesting.
Getting back to the hypothalamic amenorrhea, the first part, the hypothalamus, is a part of your brain that's like a major control center. So it takes in information from all of your other hormonal systems. It senses how much thyroid hormone there is. It senses how much stress hormone there is. It senses reproductive hormones, so FSH, LH, estradiol, progesterone. It also gets information from your digestive system. So there are mechanical receptors in your esophagus and stomach that send signals to your hypothalamus that sort of let it know, okay, the body is eating now, or the body's had a lot of food. It has receptors for glucose and insulin and various hormones that are secreted by other parts of your digestive system as it digests proteins and fats. So it has a fairly good idea of the distribution of different types of food that you're eating, as well as how much food, how much energy, all of that. And then it also sends out signals that control a lot of your other hormonal systems. So it's the master regulator for your pituitary, the reproductive system, thyroid. it secretes a hormone called diuretic hormone, which is involved in water balance in your body. It controls growth hormone. It controls your stress system. So it's sort of a master regulator. So when you are underfueling, and often you have stress and emotional, mental stress,
Yeah.
and stress from physical exercise layered on top of that underfueling.
Yeah.
Your hypothalamus has to decide where it's going to send its energy to, where your body's
vital.
energy should go. Yeah. I mean, and the most important things are breathing and pumping your blood and then sending energy to your brain.
Yeah.
And things like your reproductive system are far and away not as important as that. So for people who are biological females, in a way that's good, because it's your body can give you the signal like, I don't have enough energy right now. I'm not able to do all the things that I'm supposed to be able to do.
I'm not able to just live, basically.
Right. And the thing is that another name for this condition is relative energy deficiency in sport. It's sort of a little bit more macro version. Hypothalamic amenorrhea is a part of that.
Yeah.
But it's basically the cluster of all the different symptoms that people can experience when they are underfueling. And it's something that happens in biological males as well. It's one place where we might be a little bit luckier than them because we have that signal of the missing period, whereas somebody who's a biological male doesn't have that as strong a signal for things are not actually going that well right now. Thing reported is a lack of libido in males. Something for people to think about,
It is, because I think people, they just assume that it would affect women, losing weight, but it affects men as well. And like what you just said, it's just because obviously they don't have a menstrual cycle, they don't have that kind of signal to tell them, but that kind of lack of libido and everything else, I'm sure that's a kind of signal to them, like, well, your body's not really happy being this lean.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And in your book, it was really interesting. You mentioned, obviously, because I remember I really struggled when it was the thought of, as someone who has an eating disorder, the book recommended, obviously, from the Forum of Women, this sort of calorie number of 2,500 calories that was, the amount that was recommended in order. And I remember when I saw that, I was like, there's no way I can eat all that. But, in time, it did happen. Like, the more I ate, the less I did. And I had to strip back, even like my running, and coming from someone who has an eating disorder, that's really hard, being told, well, you have to let go of the control, you have to eat the food that you're afraid of, and you have to put on weight. It's so hard. And I think that's why a lot of people don't get to recover, because without having that support, it's so hard. It's so hard.
Yes. Yeah. And one of the reasons that one of the chapters in the book is all about the scientific rationale for the 2,500 calorie number, because when I was on the forum, there was a website for Gwyneth Olwen, who's a nutritionist, dietitian, and she recommended 2,500 calories for recovery. But I read it, and it was like it made a lot of sense, but at the same time, she was saying it's $2,500 for everybody. And I was like, that doesn't make sense. Like, somebody who's in a 5 foot tall body obviously is going to have different energy requirements from somebody who's in a 6 foot tall body. I mean, that just like that to me makes sense. So I wanted to really dig in and understand like what the energetic needs are and where that's coming from. And it turns out that it comes from the lean body mass. So basically your organs, your muscles, your bones, those are the parts of your body that really use the energy. And so, yes, somebody who's in a 5 foot tall body does have different energy needs than somebody who's in a 6 foot tall body, but it's actually not that much of a difference when it really comes down to it. So I was a little bit surprised by that. But so I do have a table in the book that recommends different calorie amounts based on body size. But at the same time, when you really come down to it, like, is 100 calories a day going to make that much of a difference? No, it's not. And so that's why we just generally say 2,500 calories, because it's easy. It's, it takes a lot of nuanced discussion to really talk about like the variability there. So, it's not a bad number for somebody who's quite tall. I would say probably you need a little bit more.
Yeah.
And as we discussed in the book, if you're more active, then yes, you probably need a little bit more.
Yeah.
But I think the idea is we talk about that number, but I don't want people counting calories every day. It's stressful and
It is
it's
stressful.
unnecessary. It's like, so figure out what that number looks like for you and the foods you like and want to eat, and then just let go and eat that, approximately that every day. It's like if you're under by a little bit one day and over by a little bit the next day, that's fine. It all comes out in the wash. It's really more about sort of really being good about overall nourishing your body and giving it the energy that it needs, as opposed to many of these diets and like stupid calorie calculators like MyFitnessPal that will tell you, you only need 1,000 calories a day. It's like, no, that's like under what your body needs if you're lying in bed all day. So it's like, no, you should not be eating that little. I mean, it's definitely not healthy. And I think it's a little shocking that they still recommend that number of calories to people.
I know, it's crazy, isn't it? And for people as well, like I think a lot of people think, you have to be really, really lean or you have to be very underweight to have HA. Is it right that you don't? Because I know even just being like psychologically stressed and other stressors, it doesn't have to just be a sudden, like a lot of weight. Is that right?
Yeah.
Would I be right in saying that? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so a couple things on that. Like, one is that it's really mostly about underfueling for your body's needs. And so that can happen to somebody in any body size. It's like, people with HA tend to be on the smaller side. They tend, but it can happen to somebody who's in a very large body, somebody who's in a teeny tiny body. And it's really about if you are not providing your body with the energy that it needs on a daily basis. So if you're on a diet trying to lose weight from a larger size, that can be enough to have you lose your period. And so it's not really about weight. It's about the underfueling piece. And I find that stress does play a role. There's actually a really elegant study done in monkeys where the researchers found that if they either expose the monkeys to underfueling plus exercise or stress, that feel like 2 out of 10 monkeys in the group would lose their periods. If they expose them to underfueling and exercise and stress, then 8 out of 10 of the monkeys lost their periods. So it's
That's crazy.
It's this concept that we call synergy. It's like, it's more than additive, it's multiplicative in a way. So I find that stress in and of itself, like acute stress, can cause one missing period, but it's unlikely to cause ongoing missing periods. It's often much more the combination of an acute stressor that stops the cycle. And then if there's sort of a low level of underfueling, then the hypothalamus just can't overcome that and sort of start working again.
And is it true? I mean, I remember because I had been 5 years without a period and I used to get really sort of like, I'm doing everything, I'm eating, I'm doing less. And I think you get quite disheartened because you think you're putting in all the work. And I think there was something in your book that had said, I used to think, God, is it going to take me 5 years to get my period back because I've not had one for 5 years? But then I remember obviously written in your book, like, I don't think that is that. Not to say that, so if you lost your period for say 5 years, you're going to take 5 years to get it back. Like, is there what's the kind of thoughts on that? Like,
so that's definitely not the case. It's not the case that it's the same amount of time that you've not had your period for it to come back. So I've done a couple of different surveys. So part of the book, I did a very extensive survey of people from that message board because I felt like one of the things missing from the information that was available was just sort of a general idea of questions like this, like how long is it going to take to get my period back? So that was one of the questions I asked. And the median time to period recovery from the survey from the book was 5 months. The average was 8 months. The reason the average is so much longer than the median is that there are a few people for whom it was a few years that they had been sort of quote unquote working on recovery. But I think that's one of the game changers that having this book published has been, is that the sort of recognition of what all in really means, and getting enough energy, cutting the high intensity exercise, because it's easy to say I'm working on recovery, but not when you're not
I've been
doing
there.
hardcore, I'm eating 100 calories more. Like, that's probably not going to be enough.
I'm also going for an extra walk.
So I think that's why, yes, yes, exactly. So but what I did find from those data was that there was not a correlation between how long somebody's period had been missing and how long it took them to recover. I mean, it was like slightly longer for somebody who'd not had their period for 20 years versus 1 year. But I mean, we're talking like not statistically significant, and maybe on the order of a few weeks or a month, something like that, not long term. Yeah. But then after I published the book and I had my online support group, I was finding that there were a lot of people who were getting their periods back way sooner than if the median were actually 5 months. So, some people were getting it back in like 6 weeks, 8 weeks. So I did another much less scientific survey, just in my Facebook group. And I found that the median in there was about 3 months to recovery. And again, not associated with the amount of time. There are still some people who take longer, even if they are legitimately all in. Everybody's body is different. And I think that's one thing that I really, really stress through this process is everybody's body is different. Everybody's body has a different combination of things that get them to AHA. And it might be completely different from the person next to you. And the person next to you might be running 4 marathons a day and eating nothing and still have her period. It's like, that's not you.
No, it's so frustrating because I'd be like, my friend's thinner than me and she's only doing that and she has her period, but I don't. How is that fair? But like you said, everybody's body is different. And that's the same way with eating and training. Like, you're never going to be anyone else's body. Like, you are your own body. It has its own natural set point. Like, your body knows.
Yeah. Yes. And there can be like small genetic differences in some of the hormonal players in these pathways that can make you more sensitive or less sensitive than the person next to you. So it's like, it's really not helpful to compare. No. And that's not even just with periods, like bodies, body size, all of that. I think that's one thing that I find really helpful for people when they're on recovery is clearing out your social media of the people who trigger you. And yes,
it's so hard.
The people that you find yourself comparing to and feeling less than. It's like, just get rid of that. Like, find other people to follow who are motivating and inspirational to you in a positive way, as opposed to making you feel bad about yourself.
Yeah. And the comparison, I know, I'll put my hands up, like, I'm even bad for it. You can go on Instagram and you see all these people and bodies and, you're like, oh, I don't look like that. And it just doesn't help, and it's like you just said, just mute them, unfollow them. Like, don't follow things that make you feel bad, because you're just going to then go on and not feel good.
Yes. It's kind of like stepping on the scale. Like for so many people, the scale it's just like this number that controls your day. It's like you step on the scale, and if it's X, you feel good about yourself. And if it's X plus 1, you're like, oh my God, like, what's going on? It's like, just don't step on the scale. You don't know the number. You have a great day.
Just don't do it.
I mean, like, when you really truly think about it, like, there is no value to knowing that number, right? No. I mean, it's just,
it doesn't define you as a person.
Your clothes fit however they fit. Doesn't matter what the number on the scale says, I mean, I don't know how it is in Scotland, but here, like, you can wear, like, I wear a range of sizes it's absolutely ridiculous. There's no fixed sizing. So it's like, it doesn't make a difference for that. It just, those numbers are just not helpful. And
And so with even someone who, obviously doesn't have their period, what is the sort of main, because I was ignorant and I thought, I don't want children right now. Like, it doesn't matter, I'm not wanting kids. But what are the actual how is it with not having a period? How is that bad for your body?
So there's a number of different ways that it's not great, both short-term and long-term. So short-term consequences can be things like more frequent urination, feeling cold all the time, brittle hair and nails, being moody, anxious,
no libido,
less patient, no libido, yes, no lubrication.
No.
So those are sort of common. Oh, feeling like you have brain fog, like you can't really think that well.
Yeah, can't concentrate.
Yeah. And it's interesting because that's one of the things that seems to come back quite quickly. And I think it's because, like, people don't realize, but your brain uses something like 20 to 30% of your energy on a daily basis. So if you're under fueling, and you're not giving your brain enough energy, like, well, yeah, of course you're going to think a little bit more slowly and feel like you can't focus and concentrate.
Not hold up a conversation, or when people are talking to you, I'm like, I'm not taking in anything you're saying. I'm staring at you, but it's not going in.
Also GI issues like bloating, constipation, those kinds of things are fairly common. The constipation, particularly, two sort of reasons. I had a dietitian who specializes in gut issues on my podcast last year. I think it was episode 5. So if people are interested, they could listen to that. So that's, one is that it takes energy for your gut to move food through your body. Yeah. And so if you're under fueling, your gut is another place that doesn't have enough energy. Yeah. And the second thing is that your digestion slows down because your body is trying to extract every single last possible calorie out of the food that you are allowing it to have. And often people feel like, they'll go on a diet, they'll lose some weight, their digestion will become a little iffy. And then the sort of common wisdom is, it must be a food that you're eating. So then they cut out gluten, or they cut out dairy or something else. And then it's like, you're eating even less. And, so it's just this slippery slope that just snowballs into a lot of gastro issues. And many of them can be fixed by just eating the food that your body actually needs. So those are some of the short-term issues. Yeah. Yes. The longer-term issues, we know that being amenorrheic has an impact on your bone density. And that's a tough one, because as a teenager, young 20s, you're kind of like, bone density, who cares?
I don't care.
But, right. For some people, it can lead to stress fractures, which is a significant problem. There are a number of top athletes that have had to basically leave their sports because of ongoing stress fractures and soft tissue injuries. And it's just, but yeah, that is something that's harder to sort of wrap your mind around when you're a young person and you don't have to worry about your bones. But, better not to be kicking yourself when you're in your 70s and 80s and like, I wish I had done things differently. It's like, just do them differently now, feel your body properly. Yeah. There's also more information coming out about the heart effects of having HA, one of which is that, your cholesterol is often high with HA. And so that sort of can lead to sort of the start of arterial blockage. Another issue is that your arteries and veins may not be as elastic as they're supposed to be. Mm-hmm. So I had a heart specialist on my podcast just last week who was talking about some of these issues. So if people are interested, they can go listen to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say.
And then, there's, again, from what we know from people post-menopause, there's also an increase once somebody goes through menopause of neurodegeneration. And so that's a place we really don't have good studies on, but there have been some that have found that people with HA, whether it's the underfueling part or the hormonal part, do tend to perform a little bit less well on some cognitive tests. So so many reasons to fuel your body well and have your hormonal systems working properly. And it's just hard because, it's just hard because you have to push back against sort of this ideal that we have in our society at the moment of, sort of the lean, fit female body is the ideal, of both appearance and health. And it's like, I think that's where the disconnect comes in. Like, there is a distinction between appearance and health, and often the two are sort of commingled, but people who are in bodies like that are often not as healthy as they would be if they were maybe not as lean and maybe not exercising quite as much.
It's easy to look at someone and think, their body's great and everything, but when in reality, you don't know what's going on and you don't know how their body's working,
Yes.
It's like looking at it on a shelf, like a magazine cover, you're only getting the one part of it. You're not seeing the whole life.
Yes. Yeah. And plus, not to mention that, that the magazine covers and a lot of the Instagram stuff, people pose in certain ways to make themselves look different from what they actually look like. Yeah. There's an account, Danae Mercer, on Instagram, and she has a whole bunch of stuff like showing just how to move your body to
look a bit less
to make the pictures look better. Yeah, I mean, she had one. She was like, "Yeah, people flip the iPhone upside down because the camera angle is better and makes your legs look longer." It's like, oh my god.
Yeah, is that what our world has come to? Man,
yes, so it's just like looking at so many of those pictures of people on Instagram, or in the media, magazines, whatever, like Photoshop.
Yeah.
Do not look like that in real life. And
look at it with a pinch of salt, really.
Yes. And I really love that. I feel like there's been a lot more people calling that out. And there are more TV shows and movies and everything that are showing people in a wide range of bodies and like bringing up some of these issues. And I think it's really fantastic to have more people thinking and talking about it and not just sort of blindly following down the path of eat or tissue paper and, healthy. Yay.
The world needs more of it, I'm telling you. And I think shortly our meeting might finish, but just for our listeners, where can people find you and look at your podcast? And if they want to reach out to you or to read more of your work, where can they get you?
So my main website is www.noperiodnowwhat.com. So you can find all my info there. My podcast is at noperiod.info/allin. Book is also on my website or Amazon, but if you order through me, then Amazon doesn't take quite as much of a cut. So it's nice.
So order through you.
Yes, please. And I do have a support group that's at noperiod.info/support. There's a small fee for it. I think it's well worth it. It's just a community of people who are going through this, and I'm very active in there. And yeah. So and good. I think it's really helpful to have other people around that you can talk to about this, because often it's, a lot of medical professionals aren't very aware of this condition or how to treat it. And so you don't necessarily get the support that you would like from your doctors. No. And, a lot of people in the world just don't understand and will question you. And so having a place to go where you can vent and get more understanding is really helpful.
It is. It's like you can speak to people who get you. They're going through the same thing. Mm-hmm. So you can bounce off each other. Whereas when you speak to people who don't understand, or like you say, the doctors who don't really know enough about it, it's like you just don't have that connection. So yeah. The group is amazing. I remember being in it and just being supported. And then when you'd see someone who'd be like, I got my period back, I'd be like, I'm so happy for you, but what is she doing? I'm not. Like, why is it not happening for me yet? But I guess it's just time and patience.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yep. It is, yes. Do you have your period back at this point, or are you still working on it?
No, I've had, so when my period, I've had 10 periods in a row, actually, since it came back.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah,
lovely.
I did
very exciting.
I'm so proud. Like the day it happened, I was like, oh my God. Like, mm-hmm. But I didn't think it would come back sort of every consecutive month. I thought it might have been a bit up and down, but thankfully, touch wood, it's come back every month. But the hormones have come back with it and the spots, which I'm not enjoying.
Yep.
But
yeah, that is a small downside, but
yeah. But like everything we've discussed, I'll take that over not having a period. I'll never take it for granted again, because it's been a long journey to get it back. So yeah, it's been really good. Yep. I honestly can't thank you enough for coming on and giving me your time, because it just means so much. Like your book.
Thank you so much.
It must feel you must feel such an honor, managing to help thousands of women all over the world.
It is a pretty cool job to have, I must say.
Yeah. No, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And once I post this, I'll share it and I'll tag people and everything on it, so they'll be able to know how to get you and to look at your work. But perfect. I just want to thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was so lovely to chat with you today.
I know. Thank you again. I'll speak to you soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.